Here's a 50mm f2.8 Xenar lens, a standard lens for one of these cameras. You'll see it's got this groove in the back there. That's where it couples to the rangefinder. Late model lenses that were made for the Retina Reflex 4 lack that, and therefore will not couple to the rangefinder on the 3S. Okay, well, I'll check this, see what sort of alignment I get. Oh, be good if I get the lens on there first, and I'll see what sort of result I get. See if that focus at the rangefinder image is correctly aligned. Well, the horizontal alignment's slightly off, so I need to adjust that. That's done at this point. The lock screw in the centre, and this screw here is an eccentric. So let's just undo that lock screw, and then using the eccentric screw here I'll make the adjustment. And I'll check to see what sort of result I get and tighten it up once I'm done. Well, that's all set up nicely now. The rangefinder works smoothly. The vertical alignment is good. The horizontal alignment is good. As I mentioned, the horizontal alignment is done at this point. The lock screw is the one closer to the centre line here. The adjustment screw, the one to the left of it, my left here. That's very easy to adjust. It's nowhere near as touchy as the rangefinders on the Retina IIA or 3C type cameras. Vertical alignment. If the vertical alignment is out, it's normally not out an awful lot. And the way you can go about adjusting that is twofold. The semi-silvered mirror here, if you move that bracket, which is adjustable, you can move it forward or backwards, and that will change the apparent height of your rangefinder image from here. I suggest you leave that well alone. That's incredibly difficult to get that right. The front lens here on the arm, that's held in place with a screw from each side. If you slacken those screws off slightly, you move. If the moving image is high, you want to lift the lens. If the moving image is low, you want to push the lens down. The adjustments are very subtle, but they're easily enough to make, because when you slacken the screws off slightly, you can get the tip of a screwdriver or a scalpel underneath the edge of that blade lens holder there and just tweak it. You can move it in small increments quite easily. And then you just check to see what your result looks like in the finder, and you can get your vertical alignment very good. It's a more cumbersome arrangement of vertical alignment adjustment in a rangefinder than a lot of cameras have. It's quite common for cameras to make their vertical alignment adjustment by moving a mirror, a fixed mirror here for example, and they may have that on a pivot or fixed just at the base, and held in place with a spring at the top and swung inwards or outwards with adjustment screws to make the adjustment. Not in this case. But as I say, the bracket up here that holds our semi-silvered mirror in, if you make your adjustment there, it's awkward to do. It certainly can be done. It's very awkward getting that right. A small change in the angle of that mirror makes a big change to the vertical alignment. Much better to make your adjustments here. So with that said, this is now waiting for the top of the camera to be put on it. Everything else inside there is good to go. And what have I got to do to the top of the camera? Well, not a lot, to tell the truth. This one's in quite good order. I'm going to clean the housing itself with a bit of naphtha on a cotton bud. I will clean the glass viewfinder lens here with glass cleaner. The glass in these front windows here, that can be slid out and cleaned and put back. That's usually more satisfactory than trying to clean it in place. What happens when you try to clean them in place is inevitably you'll find that dirt and stuff will go down in behind the glass, between the glass and the frame. and it'll seep back out later, and you'll end up with dirty lines around the outside of the glass. The meter window here, that plastic's in good order. It's got a tiny crack through it there. That's incredibly minor. I certainly wouldn't do anything to it on the strength of that. The meter window here for the needle also looks quite good. Those I can clean with glass cleaner. You don't want to get near them with anything like solvent. Don't get acetone anywhere near them. I would even be a bit cautious about getting methylated spirits near them. I just use normal domestic glass cleaner. Appears to do the job very well. Anything else to report here? Not an awful lot. We haven't checked to see what the frame count is like. We can put the top on the camera and find out, I suppose. It's important that the frame counter counts one frame at a time and not two. And it's somewhat important that the numbers line up with the little notch in the window. And I can see here that it's moving that dial just slightly too far, so that that line doesn't line up with that little notch quite neatly. So if we know it's moving it slightly too far, the answer is to get it so it's not moving it too far. Now this top doesn't want to lift off. Gotta be careful here not to disturb the meter. So how would you make that adjustment? Well, this screw in here, if I screw that in slightly, it means it won't get moved quite so far each time. If it doesn't get moved quite so far each time, it won't push the counter quite so far each time. And so it won't go past the notch. That's the idea. Let's find out if we've got it right. Yeah, that's not quite in the centre there now, but it's pretty close. Actually, I think that's going to be fine. That's good. So that adjustment's good. I just need to clean this top cover up and put it back in place. Put the camera carefully to one side and hope my meter does not decide to do anything stupid in the meantime. I'll slide these viewfinder windows out from the front. They're plain glass. There's nothing clever about those. The window at the back, likewise, that's glass. It's not a lens. Right, so let me clean this down with a bit of naphtha and then clean those windows. I'll take that shoe off. There's often some dirt and grime underneath the shoe, so I'll remove that. This is a very good example of a Retina IIIS, this top cover. The chrome's good. There's not a lot of dents or marks in it. They're not always as good as that. Most of that dirt on the top is very loose. It's just a bit of dust. This is naphtha I've got here. I don't want that on those plastic windows, and I don't really want it on the glass lenses either. It's just the job for getting rid of this greasy stuff here, which will be all skin oils and similar. I'll clean around the insides of those frames. That looks fine. And the shoe, I'll just give the shoe a wipe. Interestingly, this one hasn't had the standard electronic flash with a hot shoe contact slid into the shoe. If you put one of those on one of these cameras, what happens is that the centre contact slides down the middle of that accessory shoe and puts a bright line down the middle of that satin chrome. It does it immediately on the first attempt, and there's no cure for it. It's not a serious problem, it's just a minor annoyance. Okay, so that looks good. I'll clean the meter windows here. Here I'm just using glass cleaner. There's a bit of grime on that, which is hardly surprising since it's the outside of the window. And the window is in a bit of a channel, so it's vulnerable to a bit of collecting a bit of rubbish. Be a bit cautious about this. No, it was only some sort of styrene type plastic. It's pretty brittle and it's easily scratched too, so don't go mad cleaning it. You'll find that if you keep cleaning it, you'll be cleaning it hazier and hazier. So all I really want to do is make sure I've got any haze off there, any oily haze, any big smudges. You probably won't get that window to look clear like crystal glass. That's just not the way it's going to work. But you'll certainly get it clear enough so that you can see your meter readings. The eyepiece glass at the back, I normally clean the outside first. That's going to be the grimiest. The inside doesn't actually look very bad at all. But I'll do the same for the inside. Of course, with the glass missing from the front, I've got good access through to the back. That looks good. So I'll clean these two windows and then slide them into place. Closing up the top cover. Last check to make sure there are no fingerprints on any of the glass surfaces. Make sure that's all good. You've got a small spring which sits on the top here, a return spring for the meter button. Put that into place. Got the meter settings button here, that sits on the top. And then slide the top cover into position. The top cover held in with two small screws at the rewind end. Chrome plated brass. If you get to this stage and the only screws you've got left are nickel plated ones, then you've done something wrong. And one in the end of the top cover here. Right, at the camera at that stage, really all that is required now is to put the trim back on the base, put the leatherettes in place and give it a final check over. One thing I haven't checked yet is my frame finder. I need to make sure that the different viewfinder frames swing into place neatly with the different focal lengths of lenses. I'll do that last of all. First of all, let's find that chrome trim. I'll take off the advance lever. In fact, I might just move my frame counter to 1 so that the advance shaft locks in place. That's better. That way I can't get into trouble. It can't unwind and drop the last tooth of the cocking rack or anything awful like that, which is tedious because then you've got to get back in and start pushing things back into place. So I had 2 nickel plated screws holding that short plate in place. Here is a full length base plate. Now this camera did have something unusual. One of the nickel plated screws was missing from the base of the camera, and in its place was a chrome plated screw. Now it wasn't the prettiest chrome plated screw in the world, and now I know where it is. It's sitting in the top cover and I can replace it with a prettier example. But we'll put nickel plated screws back in the base. If there's a chrome plated screw in the base of the camera, it means that someone put the camera together wrong. When they got to the top cover and discovered that they didn't have their chrome plated screw, they just swore and cursed and got a new chrome plated screw from the spare parts department. They look fine. Let's put that wind lever back on there for the moment. And swap that chrome screw at the top cover for the better example. Was that one there? It's not particularly ugly, it's just uglier than we need to have it. We can have the prettier one. Though when I look at it, it's not that much prettier. It's better. It's better. Okay. What about the rewind knob? We could certainly do with one of those. I'll just put this on this little tool. And this little tool is one that, no, you can't buy one. No one sells them. It's made to measure. And basically, it's just a piece of brass, 2 holes drilled in the end at the appropriate distance apart, and 2 pins pressed into those holes. And I think in this case the pins I used was actually a heavy gauge piano wire. But I made that many years ago. But it's a very handy thing. You can do much the same job with a pair of tweezers, stiff tweezers like this. You need to make a point of not slipping. If you slip, you'll scar that screw up no end, and everyone will know that you were doing things you shouldn't have been doing. Okay, that's the top. Leatherettes. Well, I think we could just about start at the base. That's an easy place to start. I'll just get that frame counter to around to 1 again. Yep, it's locked in there, it's not going anywhere. On the base plate, let's just prop this up. There are 2 areas here and here. They would serve a function in a Reflex S. Here you'd have had your adjustment screw for the mirror, and here you would have had a little pin that went across there and held a spring that latched down the capping plate. Of course, we don't have that here because this is not a Reflex S. But both of those positions are covered with a small aluminium disc like this. They're just glued lightly in position, and that stops you ending up with a dimple in your leatherette, where otherwise you would certainly get a dimple if you had a hole as big as that. So we'll get those in place, and here's the leatherette from the base, all cleaned up and ready to go. That cleaned up very nicely, very pleased with that. So let me find my adhesive and get this done. I'll stick a lens on the front of this because it's a bit awkward not wanting to stay stood where I want it. Alright, a piece of paper, some adhesive, and we're ready to go. Just apply some adhesive there and then spread it around with a toothpick. Make sure I get an even layer of adhesive on it, and make sure there's good cover right to the edges, because leatherette, if it's going to peel up, it peels up from the edges. Leatherette never peels from the middle. I recently saw a camera where a piece of leatherette had been glued on by applying a thin line of glue around the perimeter and a few lines across the middle, and it appeared to be stuck very well, and of course it wasn't particularly hard to remove because there wasn't acres and acres of adhesive. I'll just get these little aluminium discs in place. Off camera for that, sorry. I'll just put a little touch of glue there. And put the leatherette in place. Now leatherettes commonly shrink somewhat over time, so they don't always sit down neatly over raised bosses like around the rewind button or around the centre here. So take some care to see that the leatherette is actually pressed down firmly in those areas. I need a leatherette patch for my advance lever, so I'm going to clean this advance lever up and find a leatherette patch. Alright, I've got a piece of leatherette here. This is not an original round leatherette patch from a Retina, but it is original Retina leatherette. This has been cut out of a larger piece of leatherette, probably the leatherette from the back of a Retinette, possibly leatherette from somewhere else on a Retina, a back or a base or something like that. But I would have had a reason to sacrifice it, and it's just, I've just cut it out. It looks like it's not exactly wonderfully symmetrical, that one. Wonder if I've got a better one somewhere. That one looks a bit prettier, we'll use that one. So back catch, cover and so forth, we need those. I'll just clean these up and we'll get those fitted in place. Right, assembling this is always a bit of a nuisance. Basically you just put one of the screws in position through the hole, support it with your finger from underneath. Put this in place with the long slot over the screw. Take the spring, slide it into position against the screw and against the end of that slot. take your new assembly, get it on over the tripod screw, tripod socket, and get it seated in position. If you have any reason to think the spring didn't go nicely, stop, don't continue, take it off, start again. If that spring gets trapped in the wrong place, it'll get damaged. If the spring gets damaged, you'll have an awful job getting this to work. Once you're happy it's all good, tighten the screws, and that's the base plate of this camera done. The top's done. What about the front? Well, two things I want to do on the front here. One is fit the cover plate over that port there. You can see the screw there for adjusting or tensioning the cable for the meter. We didn't have to tension that. That was quite taut enough as it was straight out of the packet. And we've got our Kodak sign, which needs to go on the front as well. And then we get to the exciting part of putting the Leatherettes on the front of the camera. One of those will go quite smoothly. I've looked at it, it doesn't appear to be a problem. The other one, I'm going to have to cut a patch into it because it's got a little piece missing or damaged. But we'll get to that when we get to it. First of all, let's put that cover plate in place. Sorry you saw none of that. I'm just putting this cover plate in place there. I've glued that in place. And the little Kodak sign. A little bit of adhesive on that. Slide that into position. Put that in place. Okay. So, the Leatherettes for the front of the camera. Okay, I better find them.